Higurashi no Nakukoro ni or Higurashi wa Nekai has been my favourite series for over 10 years. I watched the anime as a kid not long after it aired and immediately fell in love with its story of friendship, hope, perseverance against all odds to achieve the simple everyday happiness many take for granted, and the obstacles mental illness puts up in this journey. I came out loving almost the entire main cast. Years on, if asked to reflect on my experience with the series, I could tell you how Rika had had an immeasurable impact on my attitude towards life, how Keiichi held a place in my heart that few characters did due to his kindness towards his friends, how Takano and Shion were some of the most interesting and complex explorations of antagonism I'd ever seen, or how Satoko and Rena's stories were powerful lessons on what it truly meant to be strong. There was one character who simply did not stay with me, and that character was Mion. I cannot honestly tell you what I thought of her because there were no standout feelings, positive or negative. Imagine my surprise when, after finally picking up the original sound novel a few fateful winters ago, I quickly found her becoming not only my favourite character in the series, but my favourite character of all time. I want to explain how this drastic change in opinion occurred. The Higurashi anime is not bad. Looking through the comments people leave on videos about the series will tell you as much. This is a series that affected people and that has earned its stay in the collective conscious. Its name still regularly crops up in conversation about iconic horror anime. My anime list's 500,000 daily users have given the first season an average score of 8.06, placing it at a respectable 499 on the site's popularity charts. The second season sits at a rating of 8.31, which sends it up to the 228th spot even 12 years since the main series concluded. And yet, talking about the adaptation in anything vaguely resembling positive language will invoke the ire of every visual novel fan in the vicinity and then some. Let me try and explain. Each of the 8 arcs of the Higurashi visual novel take 10 hours to read if you're fast, easily double if you're not or you're watching a playthrough. This is a story many people clock 100 hours in on overall. Compare that to the anime. The two main series run to a playtime of 20 nice round hours, and that's with openings and endings to boot. 100 hours to 20. If you're an anime-only watcher, I can imagine you hearing that number and wondering what there even was in this series that could have been stretched out to such an extent. And that's exactly where the issue lies. The Higurashi anime is a solid story about the themes I mentioned prior: friendship, hope, and perseverance. The staff behind this adaptation cleverly and rightly chose, with the time constraints placed upon them, to convey a neat, simplistic, and ultimately comprehensible version of this work. I have no bone to pick with them. The animation industry is a stressful place to work at the best of times, and I really believe they did the best they could with what they were working with. Even so, it is an adaptation that singled out the key elements of the series and necessarily paid attention to very little else. A lot happens in this series. 4 episodes are dedicated to the first 2 arcs, 5 to the third, 2 to the fourth, and so on. It's a sharp turnaround, and the need to cram any number of plot points and hints into each of these arcs gives the story very little room to breathe, especially when compared to those with a more flexible structure. If there's opportunity for non-essential material to be slotted in where it will fit, this tends to be slice-of-life moments that allow us to bond with the group as a whole. It's economical. It's better to do a few things well than many poorly, and this was the choice the team behind the Higurashi anime made. So what's the problem? There are a lot of great things about Higurashi, but I'm pretty confident that you could pick 10 fans of the original at random and they would all agree on what really makes the series tick. Its characters. Higurashi's characters are incredibly strong, and this does come across even in the anime's compressed format, but that's by virtue of their growth being closely intertwined with the plot. By conveying one, you automatically get the other. That said, these characters are stripped to the bone, all nuance is gone, and Mion in particular suffers disproportionately from this inevitable cutting room treatment. Unlike her co-cast, Mion is never centre stage. She arguably doesn't even get an arc that's really about her. The point is, unlike the direct plot influencing actions and experiences the rest of the cast cycle through, Mion's moments of character definition are relegated to the quieter scenes, very often dialogue-heavy conversations with her friends, the downbeats between the intense moments this story is so well known for. So when the series made its transition from novel to anime format, guess which scenes were easiest to cut? When you actually look at just how many of Mion's defining character moments have been horrendously compressed or simply excised from the narrative entirely, she herself just seems to become an exercise in saving time so the stories of those around her can be lifted up. This becomes kind of painfully ironic when you look a little closer at her character. Let's do that now. There's not much we can glean about Mion from the first half of Higurashi, being that our perception of her is often skewed by the misconceptions of our narrator Keiichi. Still, the first things we learn are that she's brash, loud with a dirty sense of humour and full of energy. She makes a big show of enjoying everyday things such as club activities. She's basically a Genki girl, right? But in Watanagashi we find out about another dimension to her character, her sensitivity and feelings for Keiichi. Then in Tatarigoroshi we see that when serious situations arise, she's mature, uncompromising, a stark realist, and brave enough to say the things nobody wants to hear. If there's any assertion we can make about Mion as a character by the end of the question arcs, it's that there's more to her than initially meets the eye, but her inner workings are still a mystery. It's hard to link all these disparate elements that have been presented to us together. It's only moving into the answer arcs that we finally begin to see the full picture. We've already started to see the extent of Mion's patience from how graceful she is when Keiichi upsets her in prior arcs. Now this aspect of her character comes out in full force, and we learn that Mion isn't only patient, but that she grounds herself in compassion. When Shion literally beats Satoko up while pretending to be her, she doesn't so much as raise her voice when she finds out. And when she comes to understand how Shion feels about Satoshi, the boy she also likes at the time, she concedes her relationship with him for Shion's sake. This isn't just because she wants her sister's happiness, it's also her ability to look at the wider picture beyond her feelings, and her making the determination that it's what's best for the two of them. That's something Mion is mature enough to do. Without anyone so much as realising it most of the time, she acts with everyone's well-being in mind, regardless of whether the course of action she chooses is what she wants to do in her heart, or what's easiest for her. Looking back at Mion's life, we know she is mistreated from birth as the unwanted younger twin, whose mere existence is a burden to her family. In exchange for her life, she's forgone acknowledgement and grows up only receiving love and attention when acting as her sister. This is until the day she's mistaken as the elder twin and accidentally receives the demon tattoo, thus being transformed suddenly and permanently into the heir to her family, future leader of Hinamizawa, and an underworld that extends far beyond. By the time she's a teenager, Mion knows how to use firearms, dispose of corpses, and stand by, expressionless, as her twin sister rips out her nails under the orders of her own flesh and blood, all merely because she exists as the person Mion escaped from being. She also knows how to perform the same torture on herself, alone and without telling anybody, in repentance. To comment on something various people have misunderstood about Mion, rather than lacking emotion when faced with such trauma, she more shuts down. All Mion has ever been taught is that her feelings get in the way. Her family didn't care about them when she was a child, and a failure to suppress them in the process of performing her duties would break her. She is not callous but hollow, scarred by all she has to see and do, and yet how can she not at least perform seamlessly the role she stole in the first place? It's only when she's alone with her sister that we see glimpses of the emotional turmoil Mion has been through since she was a child and the effect it has had on her. This clip from Meakashi with audio from the drama CDs represents it well, and a video about Mion wouldn't be complete without a moment honouring Satsuki Yukino's masterful portrayal of her. Note how much younger and more vulnerable she sounds here compared to how we usually see her.
どっちでもいいんだよ。私たちは私たち、公平な関係でいたいのに。仕方がないよ。ミオンの背中には鬼が宿ってる。闘志を継ぐ定めが宿ってる。それは仕方がない。私嫌だ。鬼なんかいらない。鬼なんかいらない。 私は鬼じゃない。鬼じゃない。同じ人間なのがいい。
From her very first scene, we see the club is important to Mion, and this is why. She values it above all else as a place where she can laugh, smile, live freely, love without consequence, and give others a place to do the same, a place to be themselves with no price to pay. It's worth noting the reason she made the club in the first place, to give Satoshi and Satoko refuge from the cruelty they're subject to at the hands of their carers as well as the rest of the villagers, led by Mion's family themselves. We can also now see why she struggles during Manazashi. The way she fumbles through her relationship with Keiichi is an after effect of having compartmentalized her identity all her life. Heartbreakingly, once she comes to think she isn't enough for him simply as herself, it seems entirely appropriate to her to begin the charade of pretending to be Shion instead. It's as though Mion thinks if she chops her personality up into little bits and offers them up one by one, the other party will be able to assemble the version of her they're capable of loving. And yet in Tatarigoroshi we see there's yet another side Mion's childhood has shaped in her. The strong character that's moulded from being the person the villagers look to for guidance from such a young age. Above all else, she is selfless, with a heart of gold, and determined to use her power to minimize others' suffering, unlike so many before her. Furthermore, it's in Sumiyoraboshi that we are finally able to see Mion's understanding of mental illness, her ability to sympathize, but also her strong belief it's not something you should let dictate your life, as well as her want to help her friends overcome it. Ryukishi07 has said himself that the reason Mion is the sole main character never to fall victim to Nakazawa syndrome is the importance she places in good communication, and this is the arc that demonstrates the trait best. Throughout, from start to finish, she understands how vital it is to approach Rena and her actions with empathy and understanding. This isn't just because she loves Rena, but once again because of her maturity and perspective. She knows that what Rena is going through is bigger than her, has the strength not to take her mistreatment personally, to believe in her friend, to want her safety and well-being, to do everything in her power to ensure it, and to try and get everyone around her on board. In spite of everything she has done for Rena before and within this arc, as soon as Mion sees she's unable to trust her in her current state, she immediately shifts her thinking to try and work out how to secure her safety from a distance, without lingering on her own feelings. Moreover, once Keiichi remembers the events of Onikakushi, we see that she's done this before. No matter how much Keiichi hurts her during the course of that arc, as his friend, she knows that this is the time at which she needs her more than ever, and refuses to abandon him. She continually responds to his cruelty with all the things we are beginning to realize she embodies so vividly: patience, compassion, and love. These are the things she swears to live by no matter what she does or doesn't get in return. The sheer strength of Mion's resolve to be kind is astounding. She understands the value of friendship and doesn't take it for granted, not her receiving it, nor what it takes for her to be a good friend to others. And yet she's no idealist. She's been through too much for that. When Keiichi tells her he doesn't expect her to like him anymore after knowing he kept secrets from her and that he'd made terrible mistakes in the past, she gently admonishes him for thinking of their bond so lightly. True friendship isn't earned, but given. It's all-encompassing, not conditional. In this way, Mion embodies the very messages Higurashi seeks to convey. She knows the world isn't black and white and that people aren't perfect, and she has no interest in judging them for it, only in seeking to understand and embrace them entirely all the same. Mion believes mistakes aren't to be avoided but to be learnt from, and that the only real measure of good in a person is how hard they work to better themselves. Throughout this arc, as always, she counters the stress and pain she's faced with a staunch positivity. The kind that we should understand by this point is very much a choice. At any given point in Higurashi, it would make perfect sense if Mion simply broke down. Now, when she cracks a joke in a tense moment, we see the weight behind that decision, a continual affirmation to be more than the trials she faces. The choice not only to grit her teeth and bear it, but to rise above and uplift those around her in the process. She is always proactive, the first to approach her friends when she thinks something is wrong, the first to take action when she's right, whether they ask her to or not. She refuses to be passive or silently complicit in allowing whatever life throws at her to just happen. By the time we move into Minagoroshi, it makes perfect sense when we see that Rena turns to Mion during her struggles over her home situation, and that Mion is able to help her make the right decision. It also makes sense when, once Rena draws attention to this and thanks her in the presence of the rest of the club, she deflects it, saying Rena is the one who should be proud of herself. In this arc, we also see Mion's strong sense of justice and immense reliability shine through, as well as her ability to persevere unwaveringly when someone she cares about needs her help. We can see by now that the staunch belief in one another and their teamwork that the rest of the cast has had to work so hard to foster and learn to lean on is something Mion has had all along. Finally, in Matsuribayashi, we see that Mion is a born leader. She's the class rep, the leader of the club, the heiress to her family, and the main cast's pillar. So, Mion Sonozaki is brash, loud with a dirty sense of humour, and full of energy. From her first few lines in the whole series, she embodies this sense of not having a care in the world. This isn't a contradiction. In a way, this really is who Mion is. This is what she's chosen to be after a life of experiences that would leave few who even saw such a choice for themselves. Secondly, if having such an attitude is what will make the people around her feel even a little more at ease, then it's the obvious choice to her. There's something a little sad in the extent to which Mion seems to prioritise the feelings of those around her over her own, and yet it's not something she's unaware of or a victim to. To her, to be surrounded by smiles and laughter is equal to being happy herself. This is Mion's philosophy as a leader and as a person. When she finds out Rena is moving to Hinamizawa and knows little about her but that she's responsible for a school full of broken windows and that she's put 3 people in hospital, she still walks up to her on her first day and welcomes her as warmly as anyone else. A million other such acts of kindness I haven't even mentioned here are scattered throughout Higurashi, hidden gems you can find and stitch together to make up the person that Mion is. The story rarely draws attention to them, and likewise she doesn't do any of these things for praise and doesn't expect recognition. She really and truly wants nothing more than to help those around her shine and to create an environment that thrives on the same compassion that she lives by. In this way, she has turned the overwhelming responsibility on her shoulders into a gift, an opportunity to help others, especially those who desperately need a second chance, and someone to show them the path to a better, happier life does still exist for them. Something that might be easy to misunderstand about Mion is her strength. Because yes, she is strong, amongst the strongest characters in Higurashi mentally and physically without a doubt. But just because she doesn't always show us her pain doesn't mean it isn't there. In fact, Mion is deeply emotional. The same girl who can take down a military-grade special forces commander double her size with her bare hands will call up Rena in the middle of the night in tears because Keiichi didn't refute a self-deprecating joke she made. And yet this is why Mion is the character who shows us from the very beginning the thing I believe Urukishi wanted to tell us with Higurashi all along. That emotion is strength. Specifically embracing emotion, joy, sadness, and everything in between. Mion is not strong in spite of doing this, but because of it. She's not without flaws, doubts, or scars, she only chooses to be more than them. And when she puts herself between her friends and a bullet in one of the last scenes of the series, it might seem like the crowning moment of heroism in all of Higurashi, but all it really is her being herself. And Takano knows it best of all. Mion is absolute in her resolve to protect. So long as she has that, even with a gun pointed at her chest, Takano can't take anything from her. In fact, this is the moment in the series where she realizes where she's been going wrong all along. Takano is another person who's been through some of the worst experiences life can offer. Her response was to become hard, cold, to push others away, view them all as enemies, not to trust, and to advance in life using others as stepping stones to achieve her ends. If she hurt people, it was their fault for making the mistake of caring about her in the first place. By making the penultimate confrontation in the series one between Mion and Takano, Urukishi shows us the 2 opposing messages present from the very first scene of Onikakushi clear as day. Is loving without inhibition, knowing you'll inevitably get hurt somewhere along the line, brave or stupid, symbolic of strength or weakness? The things that matter to Mion aren't things Takano can steal and monopolize, because none of the things that truly matter in life can be. In fact, not only has Takano finally come up against a situation she simply cannot win, rather, even by taking Mion's life, she will only reaffirm the purpose she has carved for herself, to act always unwaveringly out of love. It's not that Mion's not afraid standing there, the narration tells us, and we've been here before, but she is one human who's been brave enough to carve her own values and make them her guide in all she does, and losing her life to protect those she loves would be the greatest privilege to her. To conclude, there are so many points in Mion's life where she could have submitted herself to bitter resentment over the cards she'd been dealt. For every one she chose not to, in the truest demonstration of strength I think a person can show. Over the course of the story, we watch her subject to violence the likes of which doesn't bear repeating at the hands of every person she loves the most. Her suffering is harrowing and near unbearable to read at times. In every arc but the last, Mion loses her life, but I don't think we need to imagine whether her values remain unchanged even after the fact. We also literally don't, because Ryukishi gave us an insight into this in Yoigoshi, a world where she dies by Rena's hand and she remains the character we love. Yoigoshi is an alternate Sumihoroboshi-esque world where Rena succeeds in blowing up the school, as well as herself and her friends along with it. This arc takes place some 25 years down the line, where a group of strangers assemble in the ghost town that Hinamizawa has become post the gas disaster. One of these people is Mion, emphasis on ghost town. She's temporarily taken over her living sister's body to end a bitter conflict over the power vacuum left by her death that has culminated in the assassination of her mother too. In one of the final scenes of this arc, Mion has single-handedly taken down all but one of the henchmen sent to confront her. In this scene, Mion makes her values clear. Life is precious and killing is a last resort. This might sound pretty standard until we remember that she's a Yakuza heiress who has grown up in a world where people will go to the furthest extents of violence in the name of honour and code. After this final henchman begs for his life on his knees, acknowledging her rightful place as head of the family, she lets him go. As soon as she turns her back on him, he shoots her. As she bleeds out, he laughs in her face over her epithets. There is no room for mercy in the world they live in, and this is why she is unfit for her role. This time, Mion does kill him after he reveals he is the one who shot her mother. Moreover, her time in this body is dwindling and she needs to find the family heirloom which, once in her possession, will seal tradition and leave her as the indisputable head of the family, ending the conflict once and for all. It's to this end that she literally drags her bleeding body along the floor in search of the thing that will bring peace to her family and the world they inhabit. Mion is someone who would rather lay down her life in the name of carving the world she wants to see than compromise her values, no matter how bleak the chances of success. She is someone who takes each and every challenge life throws at her and makes it another block in the foundations of becoming the person she wants to be. Spite, anger, and regret have no place in her life, and she refigures any cruelty she's subject to into a challenge to herself, an internal affirmation of her capacity to be kind. Above all else, Mion won't be beaten, and she is determined to shatter the chain reaction of unhappiness and mistreatment. And it's not that she doesn't recognise or even openly acknowledge at times when she's been done wrong by, but that she refuses to let these experiences define her by holding on to them and replicating them. She knows that she has so often deserved so much better, but to her, nobody can dictate her life or happiness but herself. Frankly, reading Higurashi was like a slap around the face. Something about Mion's essence as a character resonated with me deeply, and so reading her story was like having a mirror held up to my face, asking me, is this good enough? In the absence of other encouragement, in the darkest and loneliest times of my life, I've often been left to comfort myself. I'm a good person, I do my best, I have to love myself, even if others can't. I have to be proud of the person I am. I believe thoroughly in the way I live my life. I will forgive the people who have needlessly hurt me because I am kinder than them. Something about Mion's pure and genuine selflessness held a light to everything sleeping in the corners of my mind I'd never stirred. Bitterness, grudges, anger, and pain never expressed, beaten down by my resolve to take it on the chin because I didn't want to stoop to other people's level. This sound novel made me realize I was not the person I thought I was. Mion was that person, able to see the best in others, empathize and love them with all her heart, able to genuinely forgive in a way that allowed her to heal on a much deeper level than anything I'd ever achieved. She made me realize I was a sorry excuse for whatever I'd been trying for, but she shocked me out of my stupor and motivated me to change. She gave me something to strive for, a new way of living. I will never be Mion. In many ways I'm very different to her, and that's okay, because she's not perfect either, and I equally have virtues she does not. Even so, she made what I had been chasing tangible. She became a pinpoint of light at the end of a tunnel I'd been groping around in the dark. She gave me direction when I didn't even realize I needed it. Because I decided to return to this series at the right time in my life, and because I was able to become reacquainted with a character I'd never really met at all, I am a changed person. There wasn't a clear focus to this essay. It's part analysis, part personal reflection, part tribute, part call to please read Higurashi, even if you've already seen it. Most of all, I simply hope it explains why Mion Sonozaki is my favourite character of all time.